Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the AIIM Growth Partners podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Seb Eades, the co-founder of Considered Cyber Strategies. Seb, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David. Excited to be here.
My pleasure. And Seb, I always like to begin with a bit of an introduction. So please give the listeners and myself a bit of a background on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in cyber now for the last 7 or so years. Used to play sport before, played rugby, fell into cyber, I think as most people do. Started out with doing the business development work, 100 calls a day, every day. It was a tough gig, and yeah, now ended up actually running a business, which is quite exciting and quite interesting at the best of times. But yeah, that's about me.
I'm interested in understanding because the cybersecurity market is quite a saturated one. So talk me through, the gap, the problem you identified in the market that you've looked to kind of solve and plug with this business you set up.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started considered on the premise that in previous years and businesses I worked in, technology wasn't getting to market fast enough. Um, Great products, great branding, great people, but it wasn't getting to the consumer fast enough. They weren't learning about the technology fast enough. So we took a different approach and we said, well, let's build relationships because relationships matter, and go and show technology to the consumer. The premise is always around educating the customer, saying this is what's out there, this is what's possible, this is what you could do. I think the biggest thing as well is making sure that the messaging is correct from the vendor to the consumer. A lot of the time, messaging is the hardest part, and being really clear about what the product does and how it can help a business gets lost in translation so much. So that's where we came in and said, actually, well, why don't we work with early stage startups, businesses that are coming out of stealth, people that are in Series A, Series B, and early C, and actually help them with their go to market and saying, right, well, what's your target audience? Who's your target persona? What kind of verticals do you want to work in? Let's actually speak to those people and say, does my message resonate with you? If the answer is no, great. Why doesn't it resonate? We want to learn about the no's more importantly than the yeses. And that's really where we come in and help business navigate the UK market.
Let's dive into that messaging part because I think that's really interesting. What are the biggest kind of blunders or challenges these vendors come across when they're trying to, get into the UK market?
I think the biggest one is understanding the UK landscape. A lot of clients rely quite heavily on the providers, from the SIs to the resellers to the service providers, but also aligning with the business outcomes. What does the CFO, CEO want to do? Where do they want to take the business, along with obviously other people within the business? How does the CISOs, how does the cyber teams actually help and enable the business to get to those goals and revenue streams? I think a lot of the time security vendors have like I say, they have a great product, but actually, how do you align that with the business goals? I think that's the key thing that people want to look for, is actually saying, okay, you can help me get from point A to point B. Uh, so you have to be able to fit into that journey. You can't be a product that's just a point in time. You actually have to show growth and support to that business. So that's what we've kind of said to people. There's another one as well. Messaging needs to translate from both kind of the US side to the UK. I know we all speak the same language, but at the same time, we speak different formats of that language. You can say one thing in the US, which means a different thing here in the UK, to a different thing in France, to a different thing in Italy, to Spain. It has to be able to translate across all those borders. So that's a focus that we've helped people on as well. Really, those are kind of the key topics. It's being able to kind of fit into a business's motion as well as support them on that journey from, like say, from point A to point B.
What are the biggest differences you notice if we're looking specifically at the US and the UK in terms of messaging and terms of approaches? What are the biggest things you kind of notice in how to approach those different markets?
The US is I come from a world of distribution and channel. It is very much building upon relationships, working with resellers and formatting those plans. And there was a motion in the US that it's very, very direct. The client and the vendor hold the relationship together. Here is very different. There is a lot of emphasis on those building bonds and building relationships so that when it comes down to advice, strategic work, procurement, whatever the case may be, that they can lean on that supportive arm and that provider. I think that's a big challenge, and I think vendors when they come to the UK just need to be prepared, get a good message together so they have the ability to talk to channel and actually build out their proposition that way. So then actually the channel then have a good understanding of how do you take that to my clients and the customers. So I think there's a real emphasis. It can't just be go and speak to the customer. It can't be that the vendor speak directly to the customer throughout the sales process. It's actually around building relationships with the client, but also building relationships with the channel in order to succeed. If you can build those two in parallel and harmony, you'll do really well. I think that's the big difference between a US market and a UK market. That's where we, at least from my experience, people can say, oh yeah, we've got all these big ticketed names and stuff. That doesn't really resonate too much here in the UK from my understanding. It's all around building relationships, building foundational work, so actually everyone kind of succeed together. Yeah, that's kind of the differences.
Sounds like the barrier to entry or the level of trust required to make a sale in the UK is probably, a lot higher. Sounds like to an extent it's like Chinese whispers and that's where the kind of messaging breaks down because unlike in the US where vendors can go straight to the consumer, that messaging can be clear and can be tailored. I guess if you're navigating all these sort of different parties and they're not dealing directly with the customer, inevitably that messaging is going to be a little bit off because somewhere along the chain what the customer actually wants is getting kind of manipulated or broken down by these different parties. So talk to us a little bit about how considered kind of building these relationships, which then ultimately are then so important for the vendors you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that we've been kind of described as a bit of a cog in a series of wheels, almost like making like a clockwork. Where we sit is actually bringing people together and saying, "Hey, you're saying this thing. You need to speak to these people." And actually, have you heard this? And bringing it back together. A lot of times in the big organizations and even small organizations, one part of the business is doing something completely different to the other side. Where we kind of sit in the middle is kind of listening to everyone. It's so important these days to listen and take things in and then collaborate across them. Is actually bringing people together, saying, "Hey, you guys, you're all working on the same project here," as well as kind of bringing in that kind of vendor support, as well as bringing in the reseller support. Our industry is so small that we all kind of do know each other. We're at least 2 or 3 steps away from each other, but actually we don't talk to each other very much and in a cohesive way. I think it was one thing that I was speaking to CISOs about recently, is that how threat actors have these forums and they have the ability to talk to each other in such an open manner. We, as the other side of it, that have to deal with the impacts of those threat actors, we don't actually have a very cohesive system for talking to each other. We only have the forums if we've met each other at InfoSec or Black Hat or a round table. We actually don't have the ability to kind of speak to each other in a cohesive manner. So that's where we kind of come in and said, if we can, we will support as many people as possible by sharing information in the correct way, making sure there's processes in place, but actually bringing people together in event spaces like dinners, bringing people together on one-to-one sessions, sites, really helping people build relationships out. We have friends that run events. We don't mind sharing those event details with other people if we think it's going to be relevant to them and their business. There just needs to be more cohesion, I think, across the industry. I think that's the biggest play to it. Because like I said a minute ago, it's such a small industry. We all kind of know each other anyway. It's just being a bit more cohesive.
I think it's really interesting that what you're speaking about, although you didn't talk about directly, I think we might have done in our previous conversation, is something that comes up time and time again. A lot of the kind of leads and founders I'm speaking to about kind of the SaaS model and the deviation or moving away from the SaaS model, that it's done fantastically well, but it's ended up with a bit of a fragmented approach within businesses that they might have, one vendor they're working with for this, one vendor they're working with for that, and all these sort of different things. And, the various stakeholders, as you mentioned, that you've got to kind of sell into, they might not necessarily probably aren't security experts. So on paper, these tools all sound fantastic, but they don't actually understand what's talking to each other and what's not. So it sounds like, inferring from kind of what you said, working with other vendors, working and understanding where you can kind of overlap and complement is going to be mutually beneficial. So this approach of the past of competing against, each other for kind of market share when you're offering different systems, or different solutions, sorry, that approach isn't really working anymore. And I think from what I gather, end users, customers are getting very frustrated with this sort of approach.
I think is we had this conversation with someone yesterday. The concentration risk is a huge thing at the minute, but kind of everyone has to kind of just take it on board. We know that there's players like CrowdStrike and Microsoft and Wiz, Paolo. Most of the market is taken up by a couple of the big 10 or so vendors out there, maybe even top five. But it's how do you work around that? There is a massive push at the minute of CFOs looking at the business and saying, "Hey, how do we reduce spending? How do we do more with less?" I think is a big topic at the minute that we're talking to a few people about. How can I reduce spending, but how can I at the same time get more out of the people that we work with through the use of AI solutions, those kind of tools? I think on the solutions front, it's being it comes back to the relationship side. Unless you're building relationships with the clients and the partners, most people don't understand what your technology does and how it can benefit them. You could have the best solution in the world, but if you're not communicating it effectively and correctly, no one's going to know about it. You could have the best website, you could have the best branding and everything, but if your message doesn't resonate or isn't clear enough to whoever is reading it, you can get lost. So the client can get completely lost. So that's why we kind of here is like saying, let's have conversations, let's understand people a bit more, let's talk around specific use cases, and make sure that people actually understand the product. And if they don't understand it, we want to know why they don't understand it. Is it because the slide deck was wrong? Was it because the messaging on the website was wrong? No one is perfect at this. Otherwise, no one would be doing it. It would be easy. It would be taken up by the market. I'm sure a couple of the big players would be sorted by now. But what we're saying is actually there's some fantastic technologies that can help businesses bring technologies together. It just needs to be addressed in the correct way and kind of and spoken about in the correct forums. That's I think that's the biggest challenge at the minute for businesses is actually how can I do more with less, cost effectively, but in a secure and trust.
You spoke earlier about helping businesses realize that security is an enabler rather than a hindrance. I think that's something that's really interesting because for a lot of people that aren't necessarily in the security org or haven't been victims of a recent hacker attack, and I think particularly in the UK, actually, I mean, everyone's probably reading about it on a weekly basis. Maybe people are more, aware of cyber risks. But how do you go about educating clients? Because presumably, if a CFO, a CEO, their outcomes, and you talk about mapping solutions to outcomes, if their goal is to grow the business by 10%, 15%, or, cut costs by an equal amount, how do you sort of introduce security into the conversation there? Because presumably it's not something that's maybe front of mind for these CEOs and CFOs.
I think it's becoming more front of
Okay.
center for sure. We've seen all the ransomware attacks in the news. We work with a few companies in the space, someone like a Halcyon. It's um, how do you get the message right correctly across? How are you cost effective? How do you support the business? I think especially with everything that's been happening in the news, you need to be able to support the business first of all. It shouldn't matter about the cost. It should be about doing the right thing. Yes, there is numbers to hit and there's investors to make sure they're happy and everything, and we're totally with that. But at the end of the day, I think you've got to support the clients because if the clients go bankrupt or bust or is reduced on the revenue side, then no one's getting any money at the end of the day, right? It's we've all seen the impacts of the recent ransomware attacks on everyday lives. Can't get food on the shelves, things aren't being delivered, businesses are having to go bankrupt and liquidate. I think it's the in today's world, you have to go and explore. You have to be in the room. You have to go and talk to people. You have to be out educating yourself. Otherwise, you kind of get left behind. I say left behind. You never get left behind, but you just feel slightly out of the loop. We work with some really amazing technologies, but every day, from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed, you have to be going out and shouting about it and showing people. The first, as I said at the start, the first year of my life in cyber was doing 100 calls a day. In those 100 calls, you probably got through to three or four people. And the excitement of getting through to any of those people was fantastic. However, you still had the other 96 that you didn't get through to then talk about. I know it's difficult being in the world of SDRs and business development is really tricky, and you've got to find different ways of reaching people. It's something that we kind of brainstorm about all the time, but we speak to the customers and friends now about it. It's like, what would you be interested in going to and learning about technology so you can understand the challenges when they come up. I think that's the biggest thing. We spoke to a few friends and we said, actually, how best would you want to learn? Whereas what's the best thing for you during the day or on the evening? We actually came up with a bit of like a peering solutions, saying, actually, let's get people together. They can all bring a challenge. We'll keep it to a topic, otherwise we'd get really lost. But we'll keep it to a topic, and then actually everyone can start to talk about their experiences. It's the only way people will learn, right? If you keep stubbing your toe on the end of the bed, you're not learning. You do it once, you go, I'm not going to do that again. And I think that's where we kind of want to get to with what we're doing is helping people go, I've learned from past experiences. Here's what I did to be better or differently to avoid the situation, and then actually sharing that with others. There's some great forums for that already, but I think it's just letting more people know about them and getting them involved.
That makes a lot of sense because I think that traditional approach, it's not the most time effective way of, doing 100 calls to get through to three people who may or may not then be, happy to have a follow-up conversations. Yeah, that makes a load of sense. That's really interesting. You mentioned, or we spoke about ransomware a couple of times there, and you did actually kind of drop the name Halcyon. I know a company you're working with who are doing phenomenally well at the moment. How do you pick and how do you choose the vendors you work with? Ransomware is obviously such a topical issue and one that maybe so many people are aware of in this space. But how do you go about finding the right kind of partners, the vendors to work with?
Yeah, absolutely. We decided a while back that we want to work with good technology and we want to work with good founders. That was the main thing. You can't you know when you meet people who you want to work with, and side. So for everyone that we've met, it's been fantastic. We do want to work with them, which is great. And if there's ever a conversation that comes up, we do an introduction. The ones where we would like to work more strategically is where we think we can have like a real impact. We want to see the businesses grow. Sometimes it's all around timing. I think Halcyon, good friends over there now, it was all around timing. Working with companies like Anattack, again, something coming out of stealth into a Series A, but we really liked the way the business was curated. They went and spoke to CISOs and friends of theirs before forming the business to actually have an understanding. Gilead Cyberstarts does a similar thing when someone comes to him and says, "Hey, I want to start a business." They actually get 100 CISOs to talk to the person and say, "Hey, this is what our business does. Does that resonate?" And we really like that model because you're creating something for the need of the customer. You're not creating something on the basis that it's an individual thing and I want to create this because I believe in it. The solution or whatever the tool is should have an impact across a range of people. Similar thing with John Miller when he started Halcyon. He saw his background is obviously ransomware, but he saw that there was more and more ransomwares popping up and it was affecting loads of businesses in the US. I think the last straw for him was he saw the oil factories in the US getting attacked, and actually this would then have a knock-on effect to children or people growing up, and this is going to get a lot worse. So actually, he went away and created Halcyon, and we were like, okay, that's a perfect story, right? And obviously the business is just on a complete hockey stick. But I think what's a bit different for them is actually the people caring about actually the client, saying, look, this is how we work, this is how you want to move. It's not pushy. It's just this is what the product does. And then we've got others in the business that we think are actually onto something, which is great. Something like an Endor Labs that's moving along really nicely in the SCA space. Andy over at TraceBit, he's got a great technology, just helping that get going. And Harry over at Maze, I mean, he's gone and built a product in a couple of years, and it is absolutely taken off. But again, he's spoken to friends and CISOs and said, hey, we think there's a problem in this space, in the vulnerability management space. This is what we want to do. This is what it looks like. What do you think? And the feedback has been fantastic. But again, it's all come down to we've built something, but we want to take on feedback. And can you help us design the product? So it's actually building a bit of a crowd and a bit of an understanding with the client to start with. That's really where our chosen tech is. And something like a Secure Nova with Nathan and Ian, two fantastic guys, really switched on, spoke to clients, spoke to friends, and said, "Hey, we think there's a problem in the testing market. Can we just validate that with you?" And they will come away and say, "Yeah, no, there is a problem in the market for this in our space, and we need some kind of solution to help us." Actually, building something for people, I think that's really where our portfolio sits, and the businesses that we work with is they want to build something to help people. I think that's where technology succeed. You look at Wiz, similar thing, speak to people, build the product, and help people.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You mentioned Cyber starts there, and I kind of briefly talked about them. And I know they've got quite a rigorous, I think it's sunlight or sunrise A and B, the stages and phases they go through. And I've worked with a number of founders going through that, and I think it's so interesting. It sounds so obvious and intuitive of go out and ask the market, get that sort of validation, that feedback, because before you spend all this time and money building a product, you want to know people are actually going to buy it first. Seems like something that's so intuitive, but when I speak to a lot of technical founders, it's that sort of Noah's Ark of build it and they'll come. And quite often people will build this fantastic product and then realize actually no one knows what it does and it's massively over engineered and it's, they've not then got budget for marketing.
Yeah, I think it's key, and we're still new in the space. I think it's only 7 years old, 7 years in cyber, but I think you got to look at people like the Cybersecurity guys. I mean, their portfolio is pretty much all unicorns and gone on to do incredible things, right? So you want to learn from the best and just see what is out there and what is possible. There's a few other VCs that we work with, like Cyber Mental Fund. Again, very similar model, want to understand the business and actually has it got an impact into those customers that the portfolio serves, and lo and behold, they do. But yeah, it's an exciting time to be in tech. There's so much out there, that there's always going to be a new product that comes out every week. We've had brainstorming sessions with people in the past and said, actually, what technology would you build? With by the end of the session, the company has been built, it's operating and moving forward. So it is an exciting time to be in technology for sure.
And what are the trends you're paying closest attention to at the moment? Are there any kind of, in your brainstorming sessions, are there any kind of gaps or anything you thought, these are areas that I think are really going to open up for exploits, or these are real kind of opportunities that if any business has managed to plug this gap, they're going to be the next Halcyon, for example?
I think the vulnerability management space is big now. It's getting bigger. I think there's a lot of I say legacy technologies. There's technologies that are embedded into businesses that we all know and people use, which is great. But I think there needs to be some new technology coming through, like a maze, in that space, which is exciting. There's a lot around third party risk. We see it all the time. One of the big Swiss banks recently just got hit with a procurement arm of theirs had a breach. Obviously, it leaked data. So it's how do you trust? Again, it comes back to kind of why we built this business, is kind of building upon trust and relationships. Actually, on that third party risk side, how do you build upon the trust and relationships they've got from a procurement standpoint and services that are being delivered? So I think third party risk is obviously always top of the agenda. I think there needs to be a new way of testing more frequently and easier. At the moment, it's so hard for businesses to get a test. You're 6 to 8 weeks kind of wait. You've got your retainer in place, but it takes a long time. I think we've seen a few businesses come through now that are really taking off because they have the ability to do the testing quickly and ad hoc, and deliver it to the customer faster. So I think it's, especially with all the attacks now, I think testing is going to be a huge space to play in. I think quantum is an area that is most people are talking about, but still yet to fully understand. There's a few good speakers in the space that are well worth having a look at. Ed over at HSBC, and I know PwC are doing quite a lot in the space, and obviously IBM, and they've seen as kind of a thought leader, which is great. But I think as the market at the minute is way too young for that in that area, and I don't think we quite all have the understandings of it yet.
Uh,
So no, I think those are kind of the key areas. I think it's more around the third party risk side and testing more than anything.
That makes a load of sense, particularly with, as we said, all the kind of the retail, hacks and attacks we've seen recently. I think it's something a lot more people are aware of. Interested in understanding then, given this is where you're kind of focusing the business, or where you think that these new opportunities are going to come up, what are the biggest, challenges or frustrations you're seeing in the market at the moment? I think whether it's from a funding perspective, whether it's hype, one thing we've not spoken about yet, but maybe we'll come on to is AI and all the noise around that. And I think understanding a bit more about your philosophy of, how you pick these winning horses or these businesses you want to partner with. You're veering away from this kind of the hype cycle of go after all these AI businesses. But what are the kind of the trends or themes you're seeing in the market that I think are most kind of challenging or problematic at the moment?
I think that the biggest challenge at the minute, everyone says they do AI. Everyone says it. We just had InfoSec, and on all the stands, they had some form of AI. It was a lot of lights, and it was quite a headache. And I think there were some businesses that did a fantastic job on marketing. Um, Something like a talk, they absolutely nailed it with the stand. I think that was the real showcase when people came away. There was no branding on the site, but it was the graffiti and everything that came with it. I think the challenges around AI at the minute is how is it going to benefit the business? How do we do it in a secure way? I think is the biggest challenge. Is actually saying if I am going to implement AI across the business and help people within the business get more done in a supportive fashion, not just burning them out and just saying, hey, look, you can do more now because we've given you more tools, which means you can do 10 things at once rather than one thing. Actually, how can you be more productive with your time? Is actually how do you secure those AI tools coming through? So whether it be looking at something like a harmonic, which is doing a really good job and it's new to the space, Alistair over there has created something pretty cool. But actually, how do you understand that and how do you implement that within the business? How do you do it cost effectively? How do you do it in a sensible manner? And also, the biggest one is business impact. Friends of ours work in trading houses and in the banking space. You can't impact that performance. The minute you start impacting that performance, security goes back down to the bottom of the food chain. It has to be seamless integration, has to work seamlessly so that actually the businesses can keep functioning and keep making money. Because at the end of the day, if there's no money coming in the door, that's the worst part, worst situation to be in. So I think if people are going to do adoption, it will take time. It will be a slow, steady progress, but in the long run, it will help and people will move a lot faster. It's the crawl, walk, run situation. And I think at the minute we're probably walking on the bordering on the edge of running, but it's still a slow process. But I think once we've got the security in place and everyone has the understanding and the feel for it and the play around, it'll be fine. There's businesses that we've spoken to that are 2 years ahead of everyone else, but they've had the ability to do that in small environments, understand it, and then actually roll it out cohesively across the businesses. So yeah, I think it's just doing it in a secure walk run fashion. I think that's the main things that we're seeing at the minute. There's still a lot of learning to be done. It depends as well on the organizational side, and this comes back to kind of back into the channel. The channel has the expertise, and the resellers and the SIs have the expertise in the AI space, and it's leaning on them to say, hey, can you come in and help me? Because I need to present this back to the board. I need to present this to my CFO, my CEOs, my CROs, or just need to educate the team and do a bit of an exercise so that they feel like they're up to speed and we're all in the same boat. Coming from a background of rugby, you're only kind of as good as the weakest player on the pitch. Thankfully, there was no one weak on our team, so it was all good. But I think that's the main thing, right? Everyone's got to work as a team and be cohesive and support each other, and you've got to know when to lean on each other to get the most out of a product or a situation that you're in. So I think that's really where we're going on the AI front. Is everyone needs to just be open and honest and say, hey, I know where I stand. I know where my weaknesses are. Can you support me on that?
Do you think people and businesses are a bit impatient then in some ways when it comes to AI, that they're looking for it to kind of do too much, emancipate, too much of the workload and maybe don't realize it's this process, this crawl, walk, run, as you said, they're looking for something that will help me run straight away.
I think there's a real expectation to be like, if I have a chat GPT or if I have a Google VO, or if I have whatever the tool is, that I'm suddenly going to become a master at this and it's going to be amazing and I'm going to be the next Steven Spielberg because I've made a film and all this stuff. We've all had to play around in the tools, but it really comes down to kind of the prompts that you're giving the tools. And I think unless you've day in, day out prompting the tools and have those understandings of and how to get the best output from them, that's the hardest part. However, if you're like all of us are playing around with them day in, day out, you get better with it. But I think unless someone comes in and shows you, be like, okay, so this is how you prompt correctly, or this is how you can prompt differently to get a different outcome that's more beneficial for the business. You can have a whole army of AI tools these days, which is great. But at the same time, if you're not prompting them in the correct way, it's the same way as if you don't train someone the correct way, the outcome is not going to be as beneficial as you want it to be. So I think there needs to be a bigger say on the training or like education or sessions around AI tools. That would be pretty cool. I think it's something like an infosec would have been pretty awesome to have somewhere where you could do not training, but you could watch it in real time and have experts come in and you can see them talking about it, or at least showcasing this is how we do it. I think live demonstrations of building it out, fantastic. A long time ago, I think when we started out, Meetup used to hold. You can go onto the app and you can look at events and things that are coming up. Uh, I think I turned up to one that was like a Kubernetes event where Kubernetes was just getting going, and they would build containers in front of you and show you how it's doing. And I think I was sat and I went to the guy next to me. I was like, what are you here for?" He goes, "I'm here to learn." I think he'd been in the industry for 20 years. And he was like, "I have no idea what's going on. I need to learn and see these things so I can take it back to the business." So I think there needs to be back more of that coming in for sure. Actually teaching people and showing people.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you look at a lot of these tools, that the effort that goes into the UX and the UI and making them really kind of intuitive, well, seemingly intuitive and friendly to use. But you mentioned the prompts there. Without quality prompts, you're not going to be getting the right outcomes, or you might be getting 70% match, but actually how do we tweak the prompt slightly? And, how can we actually leverage it so it does match your brand, match the kind of the language you use, and everything like that. Because the last thing you want is all these different tools that kind of talk in different ways and have outputs in different ways. And it's just a massively fragmented, back to the whole messaging thing, that's massively incoherent. It looks like you've had, dozens of different people from different businesses all writing a different part of your story. So looking forward then, I'm interested in understanding what the future of Considered looks like. What, I guess, are the kind of key priorities and initiatives for you looking forward?
Yeah, we want to keep expanding the network and growing the network. I think we've learned over the last 2 years that we know a good amount of people, but we could easily double that, triple that, quadruple that. I think it's being able to support businesses in a different way, not just supporting vendors, but supporting the clients and helping them kind of be a trusted voice and saying, "Hey, have you seen this technology?" or "Hey, have you spoken to these people?" or giving opinions. I think as we grow as a business, we'd like to kind of expand it, which is exciting. Get some more people on board, some more technical resource. I think we're not a we're not a full blown. We're not pushing product. That's not our thing. We're here to help people get a better understanding of the market, but also better understanding of like kind of the client side. I think that's the biggest side. That's our big emphasis. So yeah, we're just experimenting. Well, I say experimenting. We're looking at ways of how do we grow the business. Do we start holding more quarterly events? Do we start holding more opportunities for webinars, collaboration events side to it? That's what we're looking for. We'll probably look for to look at taking on another couple more vendors, but it has to align. We want to work with a few more businesses that are in different sectors. So something that's in a bit more of a recruitment space, looking for people that are in maybe physical security as well. It's quite an interesting take, but actually with the whole premise of what's happened over recent years with kind of social engineering and getting involved, actually I think cyber's probably going to start touching into that space as well, because at the moment there's kind of some kind of social engineering gone from right, we're just going to monitor that person. It's actually now probably become a bit more of a physical security as well. So you're going to have to start monitoring between the two, which I'm sure people are not going to like to hear. Yeah, I think that's probably where we're going to look towards, is actually things in that space, not full blown security guards. That's not what we're looking to do. Maybe CCTV cameras and um, audio visuals and that side. But yeah, I think we're growing nicely. We had a year review, and we're still doing well, which is good. But the main one is we want to work with good people. We want to be in the right environments. We want to bring people into those environments, um, and collaborate with as many people as possible. So
Amazing. So it's really not chasing that. I know I've mentioned it a few times. You're not chasing that sort of that wave or that kind of the latest hype around AI or whatever. You're building something based on relationships, something that's really gonna improve, I guess, kind of the messaging, the understanding from both the end users and the vendors sort of standpoint, and raising standards for everyone there by acting as that kind of conduit between sort of end users and vendors. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in a world where we can get cut off pretty quickly, actually bring it back to being a bit more human and looking each other in the eye and socializing and building upon relationships. I think that's what it's in our DNA, right? That's where we want to kind of not get back to a degree, but allowing people to talk to each other across the table, collaborate effectively, have the WhatsApp groups, have the Signal groups, have the ability to be like, well, I've seen this. Has anyone else seen it? And have a real trusted group. That's where we really want to get to. I think since the pandemic, however many years ago that was now, there's still an element of I'm siloed. It's definitely changing. You can see it in London now. It's on a Thursday. It is busy. I'm sure it's just as busy in Manchester. But I think the London scene is definitely coming back more and more, which is great to see. So yeah, we wanna be more present. I think is probably the best term. Be more present around people.
Love that. And I guess as a final thing, just wrapping up, and again, a selfish one from my perspective, what have been the biggest lessons you've learned and you would kind of impart on other people as the kind of co-founder of the business? What's your greatest kind of business advice or kind of lessons you've learned through growing Considered over the last couple of years?
Keep failing. That's weird to say, but keep failing. Because if you're failing, you're trying, and you just need to make sure that you're failing, but you're learning from those fails, so that actually you go, okay, I wouldn't do that again, or I wouldn't formulate the email that way, or I would do these things. So I would say it's yeah, keep failing every day. And I think if you can step away each day and say, hey, I've actually tried, I've really given it a go, and there will be successes in there, and they're the best things. But nobody gets anywhere from just having successes every single day. You have to go through the hardship. You have to go through those sleepless nights and those worrying moments to be like, hey, I don't know what's going on, and I need to really put this on paper and figure this out. So yeah, it's the more things you do, the better. It doesn't matter what you do, just try it. Go and download a tool and play around with it for a few hours, then come back to it. Go and try an email sequence. Go and try the phone numbers. Practice your pitch. If you going back to the cold calling, if you do 100 calls a day and you get through to three people and it's the worst stuttery pitch you've ever given, that's great. I'm sure the next time you call someone and pick up, it will be better. So I think, yeah, keep failing.
I love that. Sounds like I'm on the right path then. But I think in seriousness, like kind of rationalizing those sort of failures as opportunities and lessons to learn. There's, although I guess you're kind of joking about it, but like a day full of successes is actually not necessarily a successful day because you've probably not learned a lot. And there's probably, although, it could have been a load of yeses or a load of next calls booked in, or maybe even some agreements signed, there's probably a load of blind spots that you're not then able to identify because, when we get the answer we want, we overlook all the other things we could have done better. Whereas failures, we might only be a fraction of a percent away from a yes, but we massively kind of magnify that. And I think the lessons to be learned on those failures, it's going to be so much more than, we're ever going to learn with the successes. So I love that. I think that's inspiring. Thank you.
No, it's a bit different, but the failures do get to success, and then once you get through that and you start seeing the successes, it's great. But you just some days are better than others. I think it's the new Italian football coach. There's a meme that went around. And it was like some days may be good, some days maybe not so good. But you do get to the successes and the trophies start coming in, and you do start to have a great time doing it, and you do it with good people. So that's the main thing.
I'm delighted to hear and see that, after 2 years, Consider's in such a strong place and you're looking forward to kind of expanding and growing and doing more kind of great work in the space going forward. So I really appreciate you kind of sharing the journey and the mission you're on at Considered.
No, thank you, David. I appreciate you having me on. It's been great and great to looking forward to following your journey as well.